Hey, lighting looks good. Shirt's on point. Got my beverage. Come on in here. Get in here and we will hoist a beverage. And I'm going to tell you how to tell the difference between President Trump's flaws and his features. I think it was Mark Twain who said that people can't tell the difference between good news and bad news. And you see that everywhere. People really can't tell the difference between good news and bad news. Sorry I caught you off guard. I know you wanted a simultaneous sip. Here comes another one. Grab your beverage. Ready. Agua. Bueno. That's some good water. All right. So, many of you know that I wrote a book called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. And one of the key ideas in that is the difference between systems and goals. A goal is something you say, I'm going to do this specific thing, and if I miss it, I failed. If I hit it, I succeeded. And there are some problems with that I mentioned, such as the fact that you're unhappy until you reach your goal. And once you reach it, then what do? Set another goal and commence being unhappy again because you're not at your goal. And also it limits your possibilities. So a system is a better approach in which you're doing something on a regular basis, playing more of a long game to improve your odds of something good happening later. So if you understand the difference between a goal and a system, you have a better chance of understanding President Trump's flaws from his features. Now, in my memory, and I'm no presidential historian, but so correct me if I'm wrong, have we ever had a president who, when running for office, a candidate running for office of president, who said, I have a couple of flaws. I've got this flaw, and I've got this flaw. Can you remember anybody ever doing that? Well, yes, you can. President Trump. I don't know if I've ever seen any story of any, past president doing that. Maybe back in Lincoln's day or something he did it. But it's very unusual. And here are the two flaws that President Trump promised us in fairly clear language that he would bring to the process. One was political incorrectness, because a lot of people see that as a flaw. And he didn't say, I won't do that, or I promise I won't, and then changed his mind. He said, I don't value it. It's overrated, I'm going to ignore it. So he told us he was bringing that flaw to office. Now, another flaw, they said, is that he was no angel. He actually used those words, during the election at some point. He said, I'm no angel. Now, he also never tried to sell us on his moral superiority. Unlike many Republicans, he did not say, I'm at a good moral place, if only you could be like me. So he did not promise us a moral leadership. It just wasn't offered. And certainly didn't promise to be a role model. So that's a flaw, which he told us about. He said, I'm no angel. Never said otherwise. Right? And that's part of the reason that the scandals that keep rearing their heads don't have the same effect on him as they would others, because at least we're not surprised. Okay? So when he promised us political incorrectness, in other words, said he wouldn't value it, it was also very connected to his policies. You can't really be politically correct and make a big change to immigration policy. You think you can, but you can't, because everything you do is bad for somebody. It's bad for the lowest part of the demographic group if we allow too many people to come in to compete. So that's bad. That has a racial impact. It's a racial impact on the people who are American citizens already. Likewise, if you look at immigration from, let's say, the rest of the world, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, there's probably some fair way to do this. For example, you might be thinking a lottery system. A lottery sounds pretty fair, right? But I would argue that in order to even qualify for the lottery, to know it exists, to learn of it, to sign up for it, to have the resources to get to America if you're picked, and all of those things, it really sort of limits it to people with resources, which is racist. Not in intention, maybe, but in outcome, because, I would think that most of Africa, for example, most meaning, maybe 60% of people in Africa would not have, or more, I'm just using a low number, would not have the wherewithal to know much about America and know how to get here, have family connections here, especially if their language is an uncommon one. They wouldn't know how to sign up. They might not know even where to go to sign up. So if you factor all that in, a lottery is racist in outcome. It's going to bias toward people who have, educations, etc. So any big change you make to immigration is going to have a racial component. Anything you do to get tough on ISIS is going to start to sound a little bit racist, because why are you being so tough on, this one class of people? So what President Trump promised us as a candidate, and fact check me on this, because I believe these are things he said publicly and never took back and has been consistent with it all along. He said that he would not bow to political correctness, and he would take care of these, what I'll call dad problems. I know that's sexist. You could substitute mom in there if you feel better about it, but sort of in the classic sexist way, that dad's the one with the baseball bat who goes down to take care of the noise downstairs, right? Dad's the one who plays bad cop. Not in every family, obviously. These are gross generalizations, but just to make the point. What he was offering was to be the bad guy, to take the heat, to be politically incorrect, and it came with a cost. That cost, of course, is that political incorrectness can so easily be relabeled or framed by the opposition as being a racist, sexist, blah, blah, blah. And we see that the opponents to President Trump did exactly that. Now, a lot of people say to me, if President Trump is so persuasive, why is it that his approval levels are low? Why are race relations bad? Why are people so afraid of him? Why are some other countries, not happy with him if he's so persuasive? And the answer is, I like to use the Michael Jordan analogy. Michael Jordan missed half of the baskets he ever attempted to make. And it wasn't because he's a bad basketball player. In fact, he was the best ever, some would say. But it's because there was something called defense. If there were no defense, Michael Jordan would just walk up and dunk the ball. All right. So you have to factor in the quality of the defense before you can analyze how good the offense is. I'm saying that President Trump has the best persuasion offense I've ever seen in any context, right? That is not to say that his opposition are pushovers, because they have the entire persuasive power of CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, enormous social media presence, blah, blah, blah. So when you look at the quality and size of the opposition, it's pretty impressive that a guy who had not been in politics before, at least not directly, could come from behind and become president and have a really good first year. Now, I would argue that he had an implied system, President Trump. Candidate Trump and then President Trump had an implied system. He didn't word it the way I'm going to word it, but see if this rings true to you. The system is that he was going to ignore political correctness to get some big stuff done. Fight ISIS, maybe make some changes in the budget that just always have an impact on somebody. And of course, immigration and build the wall, and all these things have a racial component necessarily. It doesn't even matter how you change them. Any big change has a racial impact that just can't be ignored. There's just no way around it. So to make a big change, if you think you need a big change, you're going to make enemies. All big change creates enemies. It's very hard to think of an example where somebody changed something significantly and didn't have at least a third of the nation, wishing him dead. That's sort of the nature of big change, unless it's some really gradual long-term change. So I would argue that President Trump's system looks like this. He's going to ignore political correctness because if you work on lowering the immigration risk of terrorism, let's say, if you work on defeating ISIS, you work on having a strong economy, those things necessarily take the temperature down long term. If we're not thinking about ISIS and we're not thinking about immigration because the rules changed, it's been several years, it's some people are not getting in that used to be able to get in, but we're also not seeing any problems. Over time, the collective, whatever bad feelings people would have about Muslims would go down if there are no terrorist acts in the United States. They might still think bad things about other countries, but they're gonna have a better feeling if they're not directly witnessing events locally. And likewise, if the economy does well and jobs are good, African Americans have better prospects, the temperature can come down in the long term. So I would say that President Trump has promised us that he would be politically incorrect. He would need to be to get some stuff done. We see him doing exactly those things, because they are causing lots of pushback. We see that the opposition is really good. They got a good game. The folks who are painting him as racist for essentially just doing the job of president. And so I would say that it's very unusual you'd have a president who would promise you he's coming to the job with flaws. One that he's politically incorrect, and the other is that he's not going to be a moral leader. He's no angel. He told us that, and we've seen that play out. So the real question is, are the things he's doing, which should be good for all Americans, but certainly have some racial impact because everything big does. You can't get around it. All right. So in the long run, here's my long-term prediction, that whatever President Trump's popularity is with minorities and women, it will be better at the end of his term. Because that seems like the system he's playing, which is if you take care of the big stuff, get the economy going, get jobs going, get things working, then people start seeing the opportunities and not the flaws. And in the long term, you're going to forget that he used unacceptable words, which even I would say. I would say some of his choices of words have been just mistakes. There's some things that he should have just worded differently, and he could have still gotten a good effect. There's still people who say he will not complete his term in office. All right. That's all I needed to say. I've got to pack up and head to the airport pretty soon. Thank you all for anybody who donated to my Patreon site. I saw a number of them coming in, and thank you for that.